42% of people who acted on financial advice from social media influencers lost money. Not people who ignored warnings, not people who knew they were taking a risk, people who watched, listened, trusted, and followed advice from someone they genuinely believed had their best interests at heart. And here's what makes that number hit differently. Most of them didn't feel like they were being sold something. They felt like they were getting help from someone they knew, someone whose voice they recognized, someone they'd been watching for months, maybe years, who made complex financial topics feel simple and approachable and real. That feeling of knowing someone, of trusting them the way you'd trust a smart friend, is not a coincidence. It's not a side effect of good content. It's a mechanism, and once you understand how it works, you will never consume financial content online the same way again. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how the financial influencer business model operates. Not the part they show you, but the part that runs underneath it. You're going to see the specific psychological levers that make advice feel trustworthy even when it isn't. And you're going to walk away with a permanent filter, one question that you can apply to any piece of financial content you ever encounter that instantly tells you whether you're being educated or sold to. Stay until the end, because the last part is the one that changes how you listen forever. Think about the last person whose financial advice you actually trusted. Not a bank, not a broker, someone real, someone whose voice you know. Someone who explained something to you in a way that finally clicked. There's a good chance that person has a YouTube channel or a TikTok or a podcast, and there's a good chance you've never actually met them. That's not a criticism, that's a data point. According to a FINRA study, more than 60% of investors under the age of 35 now use social media as their primary source of investment information, more than the percentage who consult licensed financial professionals. And a third of all new investors say they trust financial influencers and celebrities for financial guidance, not because they were told to, but because something about the way those people communicate feels genuinely credible. And this isn't just an American phenomenon. Across the UK, Brazil, Australia, Canada, across Europe and Southeast Asia, the numbers tell the same story. Financial content on social media is the fastest growing category of financial education in the world right now. Billions of views, trillions of dollars in decisions being influenced by people who, in most cases, are not licensed to give financial advice and are not legally required to act in your interest. Now, here is the part that most conversations about this topic get wrong. The problem isn't that people are being careless. The problem isn't that they should know better. The research is clear on this. The people most likely to follow financial influencer advice are not the least financially literate. They're the ones actively trying to become more financially literate. They're watching because they want to learn. They're engaged, motivated, and genuinely trying to make better decisions, which means the vulnerability isn't coming from ignorance. It's coming from something much deeper, something that has nothing to do with how smart you are or how careful you are. It's coming from the way your brain processes trust. And that's exactly what this system was built to exploit. So here's what's actually going on. Your brain has a system for deciding who to trust. And that system was built for a world where the people you saw regularly, the people whose voices you knew, were people who were actually in your life. People who had real skin in the game when it came to your well-being. Then social media arrived, and that system got hijacked. There's a concept in psychology called a parasocial relationship. It's the one-sided bond that forms between an audience and a media personality. You watch someone regularly, you hear their thoughts, you learn their story, and your brain begins to process them as familiar, as known, as someone you have a relationship with, even though they have no idea you exist. Researchers have found that this feeling of familiarity is neurologically almost identical to the feeling your brain generates around people you actually know and trust, which means the skepticism, the critical distance, the wait, who is this person really, gets quietly switched off. Not because you decided to trust them, because your brain processed repeated exposure as closeness. and closeness for the human brain automatically means trust. This is the psychological foundation the financial influencer business model is built on. And here's what that business model actually looks like. The majority of a financial influencer's income doesn't come from teaching you about money. It comes from brand partnerships, sponsored content, and affiliate marketing. When they recommend an app, a platform, a product, there is, in most cases, a financial arrangement behind that recommendation. The CFA Institute found that 63% of finfluencers fail to disclose their sponsorships or affiliations. And an IOSCO report from 2025 found that approximately 70% of financial influencers were non-compliant with disclosure requirements globally. So the enthusiasm, the personal story, the "I've been using this for months," that's not necessarily a recommendation from someone who cares about your outcome. It may be an advertisement from a paid partner, structured to feel like a conversation between friends. And even when the content isn't directly sponsored, the business model still shapes what gets made. Financial influencers aren't rewarded for being accurate. They're rewarded for views and engagement. And the content that gets the most views is rarely a balanced, risk-adjusted perspective. It's excitement, it's urgency, it's the thing you might be missing. Barclays research found that 24% of investors felt direct pressure to act quickly on financial advice from social media. Among people under 27, that jumped to nearly 48%. That urgency isn't information. It's a trigger designed to shut down the part of your brain that asks questions. So here's your checklist. 4 signs that what you're watching is marketing dressed as advice. 1, there's no mention of risk. Real financial guidance always includes the downside. If it doesn't, it's promotion. 2, there's urgency. Don't wait on this. This window is closing. Urgency in financial content almost never exists for your benefit. 3, the recommendation is suspiciously specific. Not "here are options worth researching," but "use this specific link." The more specific and actionable, the more likely there's a financial arrangement behind it. 4, you feel like you know this person. The stronger your sense of personal connection to a financial creator, the more carefully you need to apply the other 3 filters, because that feeling is exactly what the business model depends on. Here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. You didn't trust financial influencers because you were careless. You trusted them because your brain was doing exactly what it was built to do: forming bonds with familiar faces, responding to confidence, following the lead of people who seemed to know more than you. Every single one of those instincts is normal. Every single one of them is human. And every single one of them was being activated deliberately by a business model designed to profit from exactly that response. That's not your failure. That's the system working as intended. And here's the shift I want you to make. Because this isn't about becoming cynical. It isn't about distrusting everyone online or dismissing every piece of financial content you've ever consumed. Some financial creators are genuinely trying to educate. Some of the advice out there is solid, well-researched, and genuinely useful. The goal isn't suspicion. The goal is a filter, and the filter is one question, just one. Who is paying this person? Not in an accusatory way, not with hostility, just as a quiet, automatic habit every single time you encounter financial content online. Who is paying this person? And how does the answer to that question change what they're saying? Because here's the thing. The moment you start asking that question, the content doesn't disappear. The creators don't become villains. What changes is your position. You stop being an audience member absorbing advice. You start being an observer reading a business model, and those 2 positions lead to completely different decisions. The creator recommending an investing app while disclosing a partnership is giving you information you can factor in. The creator recommending the same app without disclosing anything is asking you to make a decision with incomplete information. One question tells you which situation you're in. From this point forward, every time you watch financial content, Every recommendation, every "this is what I do with my money," every urgent opportunity, that question is going to be there, quietly, automatically, not shutting down your ability to learn, but protecting your ability to decide. That's not skepticism, that's literacy, and there is a very big difference between the two. So remember this. The feeling of trust you had was real. The mechanism behind it was manufactured. And now that you can see the mechanism, the parasocial bond, the undisclosed sponsorship, the urgency engineered to bypass your judgment, it loses most of its power. Not because you became harder or more closed off, but because you added one question to everything you consume. Who is paying this person? And how does that change what they're saying? That question is small. The protection it gives you is not, because financial content online isn't going away. If anything, it's growing. More creators, more platforms, more advice arriving in your feed every single day dressed as education. And the people producing that content are getting better at making it feel genuine, personal, and urgent. The production quality is higher. The storytelling is sharper. The parasocial bond forms faster, which means the filter matters more now than it ever did before. You don't need to stop learning from online content. You don't need to distrust everyone with a camera and an opinion about money. You just need to watch from a slightly different position, not as a follower, but as someone who understands the game being played. Someone who can take the useful parts and leave the rest. That's the person you are now, and that's a very different person from the one who clicked play at the beginning of this video. If this changed how you see things, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of thing we talk about every week.